On January 27, 1945, soldiers of the Soviet Red Army entered the Nazi camp complex of Auschwitz in German-occupied Poland, near the town of Auschwitz. What they found that day would become one of the most powerful and heartbreaking symbols of the Holocaust and of humanity's capacity for both cruelty and survival. Behind barbed wire, in freezing winter conditions, roughly 7,000 to 7,500 prisoners were still alive, too weak, too sick, or too young to join the forced evacuations that had taken place days earlier. Among them were at least 750 children and teenagers, including more than 500 children under the age of 15. Many were severely malnourished, suffering from typhus, dysentery, tuberculosis, frostbite, and extreme exhaustion. Some could not stand. Some could not speak. Many simply stared silently as their liberators approached. To fully understand the significance of that moment, one must understand what Auschwitz was, how it became the deadliest Nazi killing center, and what happened in its final days. Auschwitz was established by Nazi Germany in 1940 after the occupation of Poland. Originally intended as a concentration camp for Polish political prisoners, it quickly expanded into a vast complex of camps. The main camp, Auschwitz I, served as the administrative center. Auschwitz II-Birkenau became the primary extermination site. Auschwitz III-Monowitz functioned as a forced labor camp supporting German industrial operations. Over time, more than 40 subcamps were added throughout the region. Between 1940 and 1945, approximately 1.3 million people were deported to Auschwitz. Of those, around 1.1 million were murdered. Most were European Jews, targeted under Nazi Germany's so-called final solution. But victims also included Poles, Roma and Sinti, Soviet prisoners of war, political dissidents, homosexuals, and others the Nazi regime considered undesirable. Auschwitz became not just a prison camp, but a factory of industrialized murder. For most Jewish deportees arriving by train, Auschwitz was the end of the journey. Packed into cattle cars for days without food, water, or sanitation, families arrived exhausted and terrified. Upon arrival, SS officers conducted selections on the platform. Those considered fit for labor, usually young and physically strong men and women, were sent into the camp. The elderly, children, pregnant women, and the sick were often sent directly to the gas chambers. Victims were told they were going to showers for disinfection. Instead, they were led into sealed chambers where Zyklon B poison gas was released. Within minutes, thousands were dead. Their bodies were then burned in crematoria or open-air pits. During peak killing periods in 1944, the crematoria operated almost continuously. Yet for those selected for labor, survival brought its own nightmare. Prisoners endured starvation rations, brutal beatings, disease, overcrowded barracks, freezing temperatures, impossible workloads, and constant terror. Every day became a struggle simply to remain alive. Children suffered especially. Most young children were killed immediately upon arrival because they were considered unfit for labor. Those who survived often became subjects of medical experiments, particularly under SS physician Joseph Mengele, whose obsession with twins, genetics, and racial theories led to unspeakable abuse. Children were injected with chemicals, infected with diseases, operated on without anesthesia, and subjected to experiments that left lifelong scars or caused death. By the summer of 1944, Auschwitz was operating at maximum capacity. Hundreds of thousands of Hungarian Jews arrived during one of the most intense phases of the Holocaust. Gas chambers and crematoria worked day and night. Smoke from burning bodies became a permanent feature of the sky above Birkenau. But by late 1944, the war was turning against Nazi Germany. The Soviet advance from the east was moving rapidly toward occupied Poland. German leaders understood that the camp could soon fall into enemy hands, exposing the evidence of mass murder. Beginning in August 1944, the SS began dismantling parts of Auschwitz. Documents were burned. Prison records disappeared. Gas chambers and crematoria were partially destroyed. Warehouses filled with stolen belongings, shoes, eyeglasses, children's clothing, and human hair were emptied or burned. The Nazis were trying to erase the evidence of their crimes. Then, in January 1945, the final evacuation began. Between the 17th and the 21st of January, approximately 56,000 prisoners were forced out of Auschwitz and its subcamps and marched westward toward Germany. This became one of the infamous death marches of the Holocaust. It was deep winter. Temperatures fell below freezing. Prisoners, already starving and weak, were forced to walk for days through snow and ice. Anyone who stumbled fell behind or could not continue was shot on the spot. Eyewitnesses later described roads lined with frozen corpses. Thousands died during these marches from execution, exposure, exhaustion, and starvation. Those left behind were not spared out of mercy. They were the sick, the dying, the very young, and those considered too weak even for forced evacuation. Many believed they had simply been abandoned to die. In the days before liberation, chaos spread through the camp. Guards fled. Explosions echoed as buildings were destroyed. Smoke rose from burning documents and warehouses. Prisoners waited in uncertainty, not knowing whether German forces would return to kill them or whether liberation would come in time. Then, on January 27, 1945, units of the 60th Army of the 1st Ukrainian Front of the Soviet Red Army entered the Auschwitz region after fighting retreating German forces. More than 230 Soviet soldiers were killed in the operation to liberate the area around the camp. As Soviet soldiers entered Auschwitz I, Birkenau, and Monowitz, what they found stunned even battle-hardened veterans who had witnessed years of war. Barracks filled with skeletal survivors. Hundreds of corpses lying in snow. Storerooms containing mountains of human belongings. Children in striped uniforms staring silently through barbed wire. About 600 bodies of prisoners murdered shortly before liberation were discovered across the camp grounds. The surviving prisoners came from more than 20 countries. Many could barely comprehend that freedom had arrived. Some cried. Some smiled weakly. Some were too physically broken to react. One Soviet officer later recalled calling out to the prisoners, "You are free, come out." But many survivors could not walk. Freedom had arrived, but their bodies had already endured years of starvation, disease, torture, and grief. Medical teams from the Soviet Army and volunteers from the Polish Red Cross immediately established emergency hospitals. More than 4,500 survivors, most of them Jewish, were treated in the months that followed, including over 400 children. Food had to be given in carefully controlled portions, because overeating after prolonged starvation could be fatal. Despite these efforts, many survivors died in the weeks after liberation because their bodies were simply too damaged to recover. For survivors, liberation was not the end of suffering. Most had lost parents, spouses, children, siblings, and entire communities. Many discovered there was no home to return to. Some found that everyone they had ever known had been murdered. Physical freedom could not erase the trauma, yet they became witnesses. In the decades that followed, survivors testified in war crimes trials, wrote memoirs, educated younger generations, and preserved the memory of those who could no longer speak. Today, January 27th is recognized worldwide as International Holocaust Remembrance Day, honoring not only those who died, but also those who survived and chose to tell their stories. The liberation of Auschwitz was not merely the opening of camp gates. It was the moment the world began to fully confront the scale of Nazi genocide. The 7,000 survivors found that day were not just victims. They became living testimony, carrying memories of unimaginable horror, extraordinary endurance, and the responsibility to ensure that history is remembered and never repeated.